Well, I can't tell you how excited I am to be here today. Je suis tellement heureuse d'être ici. It's so exciting to be in a room with, 800 students and professors who are just so keen about learning, so keen about trying to figure out how to tackle the world's problems. It's really heartening. I think you often hear adults, your parents maybe, saying, the youth of today, they're just apathetic and they don't care. And I see a lot of people around the room here who care a lot. I have to say, in high school, I wasn't part of any model UN group, and I'm trying to figure out why, because I always cared about international relations. But I think it either was we didn't have one, or I was too busy doing sports. But, I look at you guys and I think I'm really, really missed out. I was looking at your agenda as I took the train up from Ottawa, and I'm really impressed. It looks like you guys have an awesome few days ahead of you, and you also have some fun social events, which is good because you're in Montreal. Most of all, I have to say I admire the purpose of SUNS, to foster a spirit of international understanding and global responsibility in young people. This isn't just a laudable goal, it's critical to the future. All right, I'm going to start off by being really boring. So my speech is really about what do we mean by international relations, why do they matter, why does international relations matter, and how can you play a part? But I think it's important to know, maybe because I'm a lawyer, but to know what we're talking about. So very basically, international relations, it's the study of relationships between countries, including states and as well as non-state actors. When I was in university, I studied international relations a lot. And there was so much emphasis on governments and their interactions. And it's amazing how much things have changed. Olga was just talking about BP. Multinational corporations, are playing a massive role in ways that maybe sometimes we don't even think about. I mean, there's Apple, there's BP, there's ExxonMobil, there's McDonald's, there's my kid's favorite, Disney, all playing a big role in shaping our world. And then, of course, there's international organizations. So we've got the UN, the WTO, and other organizations like that. And then we've got NGOs. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in my speech about NGOs, non-governmental organizations. I run an NGO called Canadian Lawyers Abroad. But I think that they're increasingly playing a big role. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved that way. Okay, so then I decided, well, I'm not the fountain of all knowledge. Why don't I go ask some prominent Canadians about why international relations matter? So I talked to a few friends and mentors of mine, and I asked them the question. So the first person I asked was Alan Rock. I don't know how many of you would know who Alan Rock is. He was Canada's former ambassador to the United Nations. He was a politician. He's now president of the University of Ottawa. And he knows a lot about international relations. I think right now he's actually off on a mission looking at child soldiers in Africa. His quote, "Today's world is full of challenges that do not belong to a single state. These problems, without passports, can only be addressed by collective actions." And I think that's an awesome quote, problems without passports, because I think that that's what we're facing now. I then went to one of my old profs, Janice Stein. She is an amazing, eminent professor at the University of Toronto. She does a lot of teaching on conflict negotiations, resolution. She does speaking. She runs the Monk Center. And she said to me, "There's no longer any separation between international and national. We all live global lives every single day." And then I asked a third friend, whose son is actually here somewhere in the room, Andrew Cohen. Andrew Cohen is a prominent historian. He's an author. He's a journalist. He runs the Historic Dominion Institute. And his quote, I think, is quite striking. He says, "Because our fireproof house burned down in the 1940s, because everything we do and everything we are here is bound to something else and someone else. That is the reality of 2010." And then someone who's not a friend, very sadly, Barack Obama. So I know there's a lot of Americans in the room. He said, "The real threats that face world security can't be solved by one country because they span the world." So we have four people coming from four very different backgrounds who come to the same conclusion. There are no walls that can keep these problems out. Canada, in some ways, we think we're, a little island isolated from the rest of the world. We like to engage, but then, sometimes I think we think that, it's okay, we're small and we don't play the leading role. But there's no way we can stop things, so we might as well be part of the change. So, why international relations matter? Because you can't build a wall against climate change. A disease in Africa can hop on a plane. Terrorism is transnational. And as we've seen recently, an economic crisis in one country can devastate economies around the world. So what? Well, we, as a global community, need to figure out how to respond to all of these challenges and define our decade, which I think is a really, really good overarching theme. But more directly, it's not about me. I'm getting old. It's about you guys. You guys are the youth of today, and you guys are the ones who have to be making decisions about the world's future. You guys are the ones who are going to be deciding how international relations go, whether you actually step up and face the world's problems, or you step back and hope they go away. So I'm going to do a case study based on my own experiences. And one day you could do a simulation on East Timor because the UN played a huge, huge part in East Timor's history. So as you can see, East Timor is a very, very small new country. It's actually half an island. It's about 2 times the size of Prince Edward Island, for those of you Canadians. The population is just over 1 million, so that's about the population of Ottawa, Gatineau, or Calgary. And it has a really, really sad history. It was a Portuguese colony until East Timor unilaterally declared independence in 1975. And then what happened? Well, Indonesia was not happy. So Indonesia invaded. And in fact, the UN Security Council did respond. They opposed the invasion, and they actually gave Timor status. Its status remained a non-self-governing territory under Portuguese administration. But the bad news for East Timor was this happened during the height of the Cold War. And Western governments supported Indonesia's position that it was dangerous to have a so-called communist new country out there, so no one actually really did anything to help East Timor. Between 1974 and 1979, it's estimated that at least 100,000 people died. When you consider the population of the island, that's a lot of people. And essentially the world stood by because East Timor was small and East Timor didn't matter. And then one day, in 1999, the Indonesian government decided to let East Timor have a vote whether it wanted to remain part of Indonesia with special autonomy privileges or else it wanted to be independent. And it was kind of surprising for a lot of people. I was living in Jakarta at the time, but Indonesia, the president then, Suharto, he fell. He was forced to resign. And then there was a new president, and he was under a lot of pressure at this point by the international community. So there was a referendum under the auspices of the UN. And if you look at that picture, I want you to look really closely in that picture. Look at those people. Those people are going to mark a ballot that will determine their future. And it was tough because there was lots of intimidation, there was lots of violence, and people were being killed by militias that were essentially funded by the Indonesian government. And they went out in huge numbers. I think 90% of the people voted despite what was going on, and the vote was 80% for independence. So that was the good news of the story. But immediately following that, these militias that were supported by Indonesia committed huge destruction, and they killed a huge number of people. And you may remember the images, they were flashing on CNN at the time, and it was devastating. And at that point, there weren't peacekeepers there. There was a very small UN mission, and there was a big decision: what are we going to do? And this time, the UN actually stepped up. Australia took the lead, and they decided there was a Security Council resolution, and they sent in peacekeeping troops, but actually with quite a strong mandate. But as you can see, I mean, this is a picture of a cemetery in a place called Maliana, where as many as 14 people were killed in an attack. So here we go. This is the UN arriving, and this is what it looks like when the UN arrives. There are big planes, there's lots of cars, there's lots of flash, and it's pretty shocking for a country like East Timor. They're very small, and suddenly, you know, lots of wealth comes in. And the UN Transitional Authority in East Timor was set up. For those of you who are kind of geeky, it was Security Council Resolution 1272. You can look that up. And that's where I joined the UN. So I was part of the group of people from countries around the world that were going to help rebuild East Timor. And the UN had a huge mission. I mean, this wasn't just, you know, kind of stop people from fighting. I mean, this was build a country. This was reestablish the rule of law. This was, you know, develop a constitution, figure out how things were going to work going forward. And it was a big deal, and it was a pretty tough job, I'll tell you. People of the UN, no one is prepared to do that, to basically start a country from scratch. So there you can see, there's some kids. You can see some UN peacekeepers. And the whole attention of the world is now on East Timor. It's astonishing. This tiny little country, half an island, 2 times the size of PEI. You know, everyone's looking at it and hoping the best for it. And it's great. You know, people in East Timor are feeling very, very hopeful about their future. It's a desperately poor country. You know, child mortality, infant mortality is one of the highest in the world. Literacy actually isn't too bad, but they have extreme poverty. And so they're thinking, well, things are going to get better. Aid money comes in. So we have billions of dollars that come in. Apparently $5.2 billion comes in between 1999 and 2009. That's a huge amount of money. That's like $200 per person, as opposed to what's being spent in Afghanistan, which is about $12 per person. And what I was part of, an oil and gas treaty negotiation with Australia. If you want to talk about tough negotiations, it was a tough negotiation. I was working for the East Timorese Transitional Authority, so the people that were going to be in government upon independence, as well as for the UN. On the other side, we had Australia, but we got a deal. A deal meant that billions of dollars were going to come into East Timor. Here we go. There's the new flag of East Timor. So on May 20th, 2002, it's independence. And everyone is thrilled. Bill Clinton flies in. Kofi Annan comes in. There's a huge spectacle of people, and it's really, really exciting. So where's East Timor now? Well, in 2010, East Timor is still one of the poorest places on earth. 50% of East Timorese live on less than $1 a day. Infant and maternal mortality rates are the highest in the world. 42% of children under 5 are malnourished. If you look at that little girl there, probably, well, 1 out of 5 children die before the age of 5, and they usually have large families, so she's probably lost a sibling. What else is going on in East Timor? Adult literacy rate is only 50%. Unemployment is greater than 40%. And in terms of corruption, it ranks 123 out of 145 countries on the Corruption Perception Report. So why am I telling you this? You now know a lot about East Timor. I'm telling you this because there's a couple of lessons you can take from this. First lesson, there are no easy solutions. People had great intentions. The UN went in there, and everyone that was involved with the mission, they went in there with the best of intentions. Donor countries that were spending money in East Timor, they wanted to improve the lives of the Timorese people. But the problem was, it's not that easy. But, good news, the second lesson that can be drawn from East Timor's experience is that from every challenge there comes an opportunity. So a challenge that I thought hard about, I thought, how do you actually use law to improve lives? For all of you aspiring lawyers, and I imagine there probably are a number of you out there, it's tough. I mean, passing laws isn't going to make a difference. I mean, it makes some difference, but people actually have to believe in the rule of law. People have to, think that their governments are going to follow laws. And so I thought long and hard about that, because when I was in East Timor, I realized that, I was there negotiating a treaty, but how was this going to really change the lives of all these people? So what did I do? Well, there's a lot of things you can do. I decided to start an organization. When I came back to Canada in 2004, I started an organization with another like-minded colleague called Canadian Lawyers Abroad, Avocats Canadiens à l'étranger. And the idea is that we would work with our partners in developing countries, and now also Canada's North, where there is also extreme poverty and many challenges, to bring about solutions. And by working with our partners, that means really sitting down and listening to them and trying to figure out what will work. And this isn't a made in Canada solution. This is a made in East Timor solution where we try to figure out how to make a difference. So what do? We do projects with our partners that we think that are innovative, will lead to long-term change and are sustainable. We have an internship program, so for law students across the country, they can go on our internships, which are in Africa, Asia, and Canada's North. And we also have student chapters across the country. We do something kind of similar. We bring together law students who are passionate about making a difference, and we give them leadership training, and we explore a theme. So this year we're doing the children's right, in particular the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And we share knowledge, we discuss, and we hopefully encourage law students to go on and make a difference when they become lawyers. Another challenge that was faced by East Timor, how do you really help small businesses? So my husband, he thought about this problem a lot. He also worked in East Timor for the UN mission. It turned out that only 1/10 of the money that was being spent in East Timor was actually going into the East Timorese economy. What was it being spent on? It was being spent on different countries' militaries. It was being spent on overpriced consultants. It was being spent on reports that often no one read. There was still rampant unemployment, and rampant unemployment is a massive problem. If you have unemployed people, in particular young men, you will see unrest. So if you look at this picture, the man in the middle was our landlord in East Timor. He's a really funny guy. And what did he do? He had this innovative idea. He collected buses that had been burned by the militias during the destruction, and he reconstructed them. So the downside about living in this environment was there's a lot of noise because they were taking apart buses. But the upside is it was an innovative idea. He worked with what they had, brought in some new tools, some new parts, and rebuilt buses. And he put these buses back on the road. The question is, how do you help people like him? The money that was going in through the international community wasn't trickling down to him. So my husband, I guess we're in the NGO business, he decided to start an NGO called Peace Dividend Trust. And their tagline is building a better peace. But he saw the problem as a very simple one, that people should be spending money in East Timor first. So they should be spending money in the local economy. If someone local could provide bottled water, why would you go buy this from a Singapore business? And so he really focused on that. He encouraged local and international buyers to follow adopt a Timor First policy. This created jobs, tax revenue, and build the local marketplace. It also does a great job in contributing to peace and stability. And actually, it's very exciting, but he's currently in Seoul because his organization, Peace Dividend Trust, won a prize that was set up by the G20 leaders. And maybe tomorrow he'll be on stage with Obama getting the prize. So, making a difference. How do you make a difference? What are my tips? 1, know your history. You might think, well, who cares? You know what? I sit in the class, it's so boring, you know. Really, there's other things I could be doing. Well, I thought this was an important one to raise first because it's Remembrance Day, but I also think it's important because this is something that creates a common link. As Canadians, I think we're really bad at knowing our history, and I think we do take the attitude that it's really boring, and Canadians don't do anything exciting. I'm sure all of you hopefully have great history teachers at your school. Some of them may be here. But, I mean, I think that it's really key. If you're going to be an informed citizen, if you're going to try to figure out how you can make a difference, you have to understand history. You can't do it by being uninformed. 2, be engaged. And what do I mean by being engaged? I don't mean just being on Facebook and being on Twitter and MySpace, or maybe that's not cool anymore. But, I mean, be engaged in as many ways as you can be. Follow politics. Politics matters. And this is where I will put on my sort of mean hat. I mean, I think there is some truth to the idea that youth are disengaged from politics. And I get frustrated too. Often I think, what's going on in Ottawa? I live there. What's going on down the street? Why aren't these guys and women, why aren't they getting things done? And why do they spend all this time yelling at each other? But the thing is, if no one cares about politics, if you go on and your generation doesn't care about politics, then no one good is going to run. And the important things in this world or important things that need to happen in Canada, the United States, I think there's some people from Trinidad and Tobago here, and the things that need to happen aren't going to get done. And along those lines, vote. We got a picture here, I found it, it's I guess some students, so schools now try to encourage students to get engaged, so they do mock voting. But when you're old enough, it's really important that you vote. Your vote does matter, and you should know what parties are doing, and you should figure out what parties you think are good. I don't care what party you vote for, but you should figure out what your positions are about things, and, you know, you care about the environment, figure out who's going to do what you want in the environment. You care about Canada's role in the world, figure out who's going to do what you want. Read. Read. This is a really important one. And by read, I mean read lots of things. Read literature. Read fiction, nonfiction. You know, read read The Economist. I don't know, maybe you guys all read The Economist. You know, it's really important that you know what's going on so that you can engage in the debate. And I think what's very sad is that people tend to now only read things that they care about. So suddenly it's like an echo chamber. Everyone sits there and they all agree, and they rant about other things. Well, it's not going to change anything. That means you all agree, and so you're not really making any progress. Debate. I mean, probably we've got a lot of debaters in this room, I imagine. I guess that's what you're going to be doing over the next few days. But think about ideas, develop positions, change your positions. Join groups. I guess you guys are group joiners. You're here. But there's all sorts of interesting things that you can get involved with, and I think it's really important. And then travel. I have learned so much by traveling. I have kind of been addicted to traveling, and sometimes I've had very little money to travel. You can travel on, especially in Asia, and on relatively little. But I think it's important that you actually get out and see the world, because if you can't get it by sitting at home and watching television. Volunteer. I spend a lot of my time reviewing CVs of students who want to go on our internship program. I've also done it when I was at a law firm looking at law students. And I tell you, I really take a close look at what people have done in terms of their volunteer work, because I think that is a mark of what these people are going to be like. And I think this is something that's really important. You can focus on your studies, and clearly, you know, if you have huge academic expectations, you're going to have to do well in school. But I think volunteering is something that will make a big difference in the lives of people that you're helping, but also make a huge difference in your life, and it'll also round you out as a person. And the last thing I'm going to say is you should take action. So maybe I am trying to make you into an activist. I heard Olga say, we're not here to make you all into activists, but it's kind of like being a feminist. You know, I think all people should care about women and women's issues, and so I think you should care about taking action. I think you guys should care about making a difference. It's pretty easy to say, you know what, these problems that we're facing are too big. What can I do? And then just disengage, just give up. Well, how's that going to leave us? I have 3 little kids, 2, 4, and 6. And that's part of the reason I get up every day and do what I do, because I think, you know what? A lot of the problems that we're facing, I'm not going to be around to have to deal with. My kids are. There's lots of ways you can take action, and I think something to consider is that small actions do matter. So with Canadian Lawyers Abroad, do I think I'm going to change the world in the broad sense? Do I think I'm going to establish the rule of law in every country, that everyone's going to have access to justice? No. But I think I can make small incremental differences that will have an impact on people's lives. And I'd encourage you to figure out how you can do the same. And I think this picture, actually, it's from Free the Children's We campaign. Clearly you guys are big fans. Fortunately, I'm not one of the Kilburgers, so if you're a girl, that's maybe too bad. I like the signs, though. I don't know if you can read the signs. So one is, we are change, but the other one is, now, that's when. And I like that. Now, that's when. So I'm going to end with a quote from one of my favorite authors, and hopefully I've kept within time. I'm very scared of Olga. Dr. Seuss. What does Dr. Seuss have to say? Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. All right, well, I just want to thank you. I'm delighted to be here. You guys are, wow, a really great audience. I have to speak to 800 high school students more often. I know you guys are going to have an excellent, excellent time here. You're in really good hands with the group you've got here. They'll you know, let you explore ideas and keep you on time, which is important. And you know what? Have fun and make a difference. Thanks.